Well, this should be good tonight. The photo that I have up is a thumbnail of fancy new connecting rods that basically have a swinging pivot at the top as to obviously eliminate side loading and loading on the piston and stuff. But the question is, or at least for me, the most interesting thing is that the manufacturer of the rods or the designer is saying that in their the information that they put on. I think this came. Somebody sent me this from probably Facebook or Instagram. So their promotion was that they're going to this rod because of this swingy metal thing at the top was going to increase torque production by 30%. Like that's my favorite thing about this. I really like the design. I think it's cool. I think it would be neat if you could actually get rid of side loading or thrust loading. We talked about this many times. We're talking about flipping the pistons and that kind of nonsense. This takes that to a new level, theoretically, I guess. And so we're going to talk about that. We'll put that up as a poll just right off the bat. Okay, so the question is, will the fancy connecting rods seen in the thumbnail increase torque production by 30%? Let's see what people have to say. My guess is we're going to talk about it, so I won't spoil the poll, but make sure you go vote in the poll. So here are a couple of problems I have with this. First of all, not a problem. I like it. I think it's a cool idea. I think, and looking at it, I'm like, okay, that to me, that connecting rod, I liken it to like a roller rocker. So we should be able to get rid of friction, potentially side loading. Let's say that this thing was like 100% effective in doing what it's supposed to do. Let's say that the way that it pivots and rocks and it does it correctly every time at the kind of speeds that we're talking about, and all that works out, and that it eliminates like thrust loading on the piston. So my question is this. When somebody says that you're going to gain 30% in torque, I don't know that they know. Maybe they don't know what that equates to. It might be that I don't understand the physics of this, and I don't understand how much power potential is there. I don't think that that's it, but I'm open to that being a possibility. So we'll leave that as possibility number one. The next possibility is that if we're looking at, let's say we're looking at an LS 48, 53, 60. So we're talking about something that makes 300, 350, 400 foot-pounds of torque. So if we have something that makes 400 foot-pounds of torque and we put these fancy connecting rods in it and we increase it by 30%, that's a gain of 120 foot-pounds. So now that should put that number into perspective. That's the equivalent of about 4.5 pounds of boost from a turbo, assuming we went directly and we were able to apply that directly. So my question is, even if the rods work, if they're 100% effective and they eliminate any sort of frictional loss or loading loss associated with the piston moving up and down, if you look at the rod angularity, even on most production motors, even on extreme ones that would have short rods in them and long stroke or things that we build, even if you look at those examples, do you honestly think that there is 120 foot-pounds of torque waiting there to be discovered between one connecting rod and another connecting rod of any length and any design and any feasible rod angularity? Do you think that there's 120 foot-pounds of torque worth of load that can now be eliminated? I don't think that there is. I don't want to spoil the poll, but I honestly don't think there is, unless there's something about the math that I'm not getting, unless something's changing about the being able to apply more average cylinder pressure, because that's the only way that this can happen. Can you apply more cylinder pressure? So is some other thing changing that's applying more force on this? Because otherwise I don't see any other way for, we saw this with the change in angle on the piston flip deal, and it resulted in no power. And when you do the math on it, it's easy to understand why there's no power there. You'd have to have a dramatic change, and there'd have to be almost visible side loading for there to be a problem. And then you have artificially created a problem, and then voila, you have solved the problem. But even then, I don't know how you can put 120 foot-pounds of side loading in something, if that's where they're getting their power from, and then have it not be there, because it's already not there. Most motors are really, really good about that, and they're not going to leave that much on the table. And even when we do silly things like run a 400 small block with a short rod, or 383, or a 5-liter stroker 347, and we have more rod angularity. Even when we do stuff like that, which they last a long time and they still make lots of power. So here's the thing: if you were building a stroker and you're changing the rod angularity so much because you were using a short rod and not a long rod, not changing the compression height and doing all the things wrong, and you did the stroker and you gained power from displacement, but then lost it all because of this 120 foot-pounds of extra side loading, then we would see no power gain. But we've never seen that on any application. So that's kind of my take on this. And there might be something that I'm missing. So hopefully some guys maybe can tell me what really is going on. What I'm kind of hoping is the people that are responsible for this are trolling people and going, look, how many guys can we get to talk about this and say that there's no way that this is going to work? I'm sure that we can send this to engineers and stuff and have all of them just like lose their mind and go nuts and say, look, there's no way that this is possible. If that is, I salute them, and I'm talking about it, and we're talking about it, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it some more. And so I salute them if that's the case. That's a good trolling job. That you get high marks for trolling motors. But if it's true and there's something I don't know about it, which is I'm not a physicist, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a connecting rod designer, but I have tested lots of them. And like I said, I understand how this is working, and I understand what it's changing, but I don't understand how the thing that is changing could possibly equate to the numbers that they're talking about. And the reason that I bring up this rod thing is not totally about the rod thing, but we see this in a lot of things. I made a comment on a post about spark plugs. Somebody had posted a thing about a 3-prong spark plug back to like in the 50s. They're like, see this, the E3 plug is nothing new. And really it's not, because when there was internal combustion engine development, like ramped up, which we saw for the war back in the day when they were doing piston engines, they looked at a lot of that stuff. They looked at it intensely, and they tried lots of different weird spark plugs. So with multiples and not only did this thing have 3 prongs, the 3-prong attack, but they were basically U grooves underneath with like fancy ends and stuff. So it was, these were aviation plugs they are using. And they even said, which to their credit, I thought it was awesome. I don't know if they were champions or whose they were. I have to go back and look at the post. But it said, these will not increase your fuel mileage by 50%. So they were honest in their thing. They're saying, look, even back then, everybody had all these fancy plugs that were, because it was like the tonic and elixir salesman that went around in the covered wagons and sold the magic stuff, which is basically laudanum or some sort of opiate mixed with alcohol, so that when you drank it, I feel fantastic now. And this is and the spark plug thing is equivalent to that. This oil will give you 20 more miles per gallon, and these plugs will do that. And because there wasn't anybody saying that, hey, you can't say that, that's against the law. It really doesn't do that. because then they could argue, well, in our testing, it obviously did that. And then they show their test results, and their test results are fudged. And so then they would have to sue them for that. It's a whole big thing. And so this stuff kind of proliferated back then, and people could say that. But to their credit, the people that the ad that they were showing said this doesn't do that. But it might help the thing start better and might give you better mileage and be more responsive and all the things, all the names that you can't really test and put actual numbers on. But you can sway people with. So they were doing a little bit of that as well. So I think that this connecting rod thing, with its 30% gain is, I don't like, if they would have put 3%, I would have been doing a little head scratching then. I'd have been thinking, I wonder if that's I would wonder if that's real. I wonder if that's that would tell me that, first of all, if it's 3%, it would tell me that the testing that they did was more regimented and they were looking a lot closer at stuff. When they say 30%, then I'm like, somebody just made that up. It sounds like I don't know how that's possible. So you guys can let me know how you guys think it's possible. I'm going to check our poll. We're at 86% saying, no, they don't think the fancy rods are going to do 30%. Let's see. I'm scrolling back to get to the beginning here and see what people are doing. Spare the rod. What's up? Spoil a child. Exactly. I'm glad somebody knows their stuff here. Good to see everybody. Hello, everybody. 30% is a big number. Yep. Working Nights, just want to say hi. JPL, what's up? Mexico City's in the house. 1 p.m. Darwin, Australia. The boys down under, welcome. Sounds like the Honda had their own business. Yeah. I'd like to, Wayne, I'm with you. I'd like to see some numbers. I'd like to see the test data. I'd like to see what they tested it on. Hit the thumbs up button. Yeah, we have 217 people here and 59 likes. Come on. You got to like this. How do you not like a fancy connecting rod? It does claim 30% at low engine speeds. So why would it do it at low engine speeds? They have 5.3 and 6.2 rods already now. Aussie Love from Newcastle. Rob's in the house. I say no, and it will cause damage to the engine eventually. More moving parts. If it did work, they'd be doing this for a long time. There are things that happen that people discover that, that do work, that people are like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. We should have been doing that all along. There was supposedly a scam back then. You could run a car on water. Supposedly there would be acetone in the gas tank if it made 30% more torque. Why doesn't every OM already do it yet? How does Richard Holder not know? Richard Holder does not know. He's not knowing. Claim to increase torque by 30%, but no claim of horsepower. Well, those would be the same, right? Stock bottom end LS for the win. Crowdfund to set for Richard. Does it say how much they cost? Does anybody see that? Might lengthen effective power stroke more than 30%, maybe longer load on the rod. That's what I'm looking at. The 3D animation looks like a shorter rod. Yeah, and even if we did a dramatic change in rod length, I just don't see how there would be anything near that sort of percentage available. Have you used Molnar rods? I have not, but a couple of guys that have been to West Tech have, and they've had good success with them. Apparently changed the dwell time at 90-degree crank angle. But the dwell time is not when you would want to be. There's no compression there. Not no compression. It's not on the it's not producing power right there though. Snake oil. How do they have to? We asked somebody that. I think the Prolong guy. Um, I think my buddy Bernie did that when they were doing a demonstration of running the motor on dirt or whatever they were doing. Oh, look, it just saves the engine. It works great. My buddy Bernie said, "Look, I have an American Express like Gold card or Platinum card. You can put on whatever you want. If I can take that engine out and drive it around, and it makes it around the track." Oh, we can't do that. No, I know you can't do that because it's not working. There's no load on the motor right now, and there's no RPM. That's why it's not hurting itself. And then we added the snake oil thing. Made me think about it. He wanted to walk up to the guy and say, "Hey, look, do you injure the snakes when you squeeze them?" And the guy's like, "What for? What? Well, like when you get the oil out of it." He didn't get it though. Yeah, rubber coated piston would be great because then the detonation would just bounce off and then create more pressure. Maximum cylinder pressure after TDC. Have you ever used Johnson lifters? I have, but I don't know about them being the best. Richard, I'm using Molnar rods in my 1 liter G10 build. Wow, dude, that's stepping way up. I have a set of. I actually have a 1 liter Sprint motor. I have forged internals for it because I have a motor that we were going to go to Bonneville with. And so I have forged Wiseco pistons and I have forged rods for it also. And I think the rods are Potter rods, if I remember right. Just got here. How much for a decent set of rods for an already built 355? A 355 Chevy, a small block? There's lots of cheap rods for those. Intake recommendations for a Torque Storm LY6 243 heads. With the 229, why do you have 243 heads on it? I'm just curious. Finally got the rear wheel spinning on my Regal. That's good. Congratulations on your burnout. Apparently, a boat engine maker has made a large displacement 4-cylinder 7.5 liter. That's a lot. $654 horsepower from a 7.5 liter at 5,500 RPM is a lot. Running a 4.8 crank with 5.3 rods. How are you going to do that? The piston would be down in the hole quite a bit. I've heard there are several manufacturers, independents, working on getting a carbon or carbon fiber rod to work. A carbon fiber connecting rod? They're a ways off from doing that, I think. I remember the S3 Laguna. You can look that up. That's available online. There was no price indicated for the Thunder rods by Transcend Engineering. So that's who manufactures these, I guess, or is selling them. Maybe that's the manufacturer. I want to spray a 200 shot on a 96 roller, 351 H beams, forged piston, stock crank, RHS, 11.5 to 1, solid roller cam. Well, the cast crank will take the abuse. It won't even know that it's there. Ported 243 heads on the LY6. So if you're running a centrifugal blower, blower is kind of limiting for what kind of power it can make. But a fast intake would be good for 6,500 or 7,000. Four 8 rods and a 5.3. That's going to be problematic. Have you ever tried AFR 18-degree big block heads on anything? No, the guys at West Tech have run them, and I think compared them to the I'm thinking the Brodex 20-degree heads, maybe 3D printed rods. Part of their increase came from tuning, so the engine likes after using the rods. But even still, even if it is tuning, I would hope that they optimize tuning before that and then optimize tuning after that. And that somehow the rod, this variable rod position, is going to want some sort of change in timing. But I don't really know why. And also the 30%. Even if you're gaining 30% at 1,500 RPM or 2,000 RPM, that's still going to be, you're still going to be making 300 foot-pounds of torque there. So that's still 90 foot-pounds. So how do you get 90 foot-pounds? That just seems like a lot to me. All the Suzuki G-Series engines with 19 millimeter floating pin are forged from the factory. Road and Track has an article on them. So they are the manufacturer. Cool. And I don't remember what the compression was with the 185 heads. I don't even remember trying to calculate it. But you remember the Jaeger rods? I think they were composite. I think people have tried carbon fiber or composite connecting rods before and not had them work. But just because that was one try, I mean, lots of people tried to make airplanes and failed many, many times, but they eventually got it right. Scat cast crank, forged rods and pistons, 331 or 347. What would you use? Low boost trick? Well, the 347 will make more power because it's bigger. Trick flow stage 3 cam and low boost. The stage 3 cam is going to like a 347 more than a 331. Not because of rod angularity or anything, because that's a big enough cam where it's going to want a bigger motor. 363s with 20511Rs can make big power. Yep. Lamborghini promised a carbon rod by 2018. We're past that, right? Justin, my question is, because I get this question a lot, like how much compression would you run, or what's the maximum compression you could run? Well, my question is, why are you trying to run a lot of static compression? To me, running lots of static compression, I had this conversation a couple of times today in comments and emails and stuff, and messages from Facebook and Instagram. But my question is, why are you trying to run a lot of static compression? The turbo is going to dictate how much power you make. And with a 10-to-1 5.3 and a GT45, you're going to have enough response rate already. So, the argument that you'd want more response rate, I would put a smaller cam in it. I wouldn't have run that cam. With a GT45 turbo, I wouldn't have picked that cam. Not because it's not a turbo cam. It is. They all are. But I would have picked a smaller one. But if you have that cam, it will work. And it will run, and a GT45, you'll be able to max it out. So there's no reason to go higher in static compression. Turbo on an 8.1 sounds like a good towing setup. It could. It's going to have to swivel at the piston pin also. Cameron, I have a 5.7 alloy motor, so it's an LS1, 241 heads. That's an LS1 head, 6-speed. Cam is a 217, 225. Turned out 360 wheel horsepower, but I'm getting way too used to the power that happens. We don't use the word thoughts here, so in the future, don't put the word thoughts in your comment. But I'm assuming you're from Australia. 360 wheel horsepower is pretty good. More camshaft would help, and then porting the heads would help a lot. I don't know what year that is and what intake you have, but if it's an LS1 intake, put an LS6 intake manifold on it, or a fast, or a Dorman. Just a way to use shorter rods. Let's see. These rods seem like they're just a way to use shorter rods in existing engine. Shorter rods should produce more torque, if I understand correctly. Solid carbon crystal connecting rods. Will the power numbers be on a 408 rec port head intake with an LSA blower? I don't know about the LSA blower. The motor is like the motor that we ran in the video. That should be a 600 horsepower motor, I would think. I don't know what or if it's a stock rec port head, then 575 or 580. And then the blower depends on how fast you're spinning it and if you've ported it and you have a good entry on it and stuff. I've heard of old school racers stretching stock rods. How exactly would they do that? Long rods are nice to have if you want to slow your piston acceleration down. Back to work. JPL's out. And I'm not convinced that a longer rod or shorter rod is going to change the power at all anyways. A lot of people buy LS4 intakes from Amazon or Rave in the reviews. Why would they do that? That's a terrible intake manifold. Need some Slick 50, that's right. Are the gains worth it porting heads for a blower application? It depends. If you can make the NA motor more powerful, it will make more power at any given blower speed. But it's just so much easier to spin the blower faster. Tony, the thoughts thing is like an open-ended question. It's like, here, Richard, I've asked you a essay question. It's much easier for people to be specific about their things, about their questions. Hey, will a long rod make more power? Or is that question better than long rod thoughts? No, that's not allowed. Because that's not even a real question. Yeah, don't buy LS4 intakes. And if you have one, get rid of it for something else. So Tristan, do the math. If the piston is capable of exerting more force, you can sweep a greater circumference of work. It will make more torque. So are you saying that this will work? You're saying that the rod will work? I've seen builders making intakes that expand in diameter as it approaches the throttle body. What do you mean the thing that approaches the throttle body is an air intake? You're talking about the intake manifold after the throttle body or the air inlet before the throttle body? I don't know which one you're talking about. Which eBay seller do you buy the GT45? I think we bought them from DNA. And Karlov, that as a general statement is accurate. More power NA means that you'll make more power under boost. But if you're limiting that with a turbo that only makes 700 horsepower, none of this other stuff matters. It's like porting a head or putting aftermarket heads on. If you can already make 700 horsepower with this turbo and you put a ported head on, you can still make 700 horsepower with that turbo. Same thing with compression. Adding compression is going to reduce, like narrow your tuning window for one thing. So it's going to be more prone to detonation, which you don't need. And you also don't need that if you can already make all the power that the turbo will make. So there's more to consider than just step one. I chose the SS2, but I got it from a friend for $50. That's a perfect reason to have it. More or less distillation for a turbo gas tow truck, 4.8 versus 6.2. Is there any benefit to the 4.8 in a towing application? I think you could get better fuel mileage with the smaller motor, because if you're towing, I don't think you're going to be towing under boost the whole time. I watched the discussion with Uncle Tony and David Vizard on this whole thing. I spent a while on videos and physics behind it and probably forgot everything I learned. Uncle Tony would not be the guy that you would want to listen to for any physics discussion. David Vizard's really good. He's pretty sharp. I don't know that he's ever seen the rods that are here or tested those, but he understands what's going on. Uncle Tony doesn't have the physics education for that. I have an LS1 with L6 intake manifold and 241 heads. I'm looking for inexpensive power on pump gas, preferably 600 or better at the crank. Yeah, you could do that with a GT45, and you could do that with a cam. I would just put a small cam in it. Something like the Truck Norris would be good in that. The 8.1 with a turbo is a wonderful towing setup. Mike uses that in his, and his truck is really cool because it has a turbo 8.1 in it. But I don't, like I said, when you're towing, your fuel mileage thing is going to be how much am I using the power, and then how much am I using the mileage part of it. And so I think that where you're splitting that could favor fuel mileage side on the 4.8. When you're like, if you're cruising down a flat road, like I did going out to Ohio and a lot of the stuff, when you're just cruising and just chewing up miles going down a relatively flat, stretch of highway, you're not really using the power part of it. So you don't need any of that. You need the fuel mileage part of it. And for an 8.1, I don't think under those kind of conditions it's going to get as good a mileage um, as a 4.8. I think you'd see less of a difference between a 6.2 and a 4.8. And it may be that you have to get in the throttle more on the 4.8 and use because the more that you're going to be getting into the richer end of the air fuel spectrum, the more fuel you're going to use. So the less you can drive it in boost and have it be closer to the stoichiometric value of cruising, you're going to get better mileage doing that. Why not use a longer pin height on piston and short rod? That's the effect that one would have. That's a comment for Casey, I guess. Brandon, yeah, diesels work really well. There's no vacuum, so there's there's no pumping loss. It's at wide open throttle. You can run a leaner mixture. They run lots of static compression, which helps. They run boost. Richard, dynamic compression limit of a 91 octane 5.3. I don't know that because the dynamic compression is not the thing that's going to determine knock. It's not the only thing. There's lots of other things that are going to determine knock. Monty, Richard, I've noticed there are several different part numbers for 5.3 and 4.8 head gaskets for different years and variants. Why do you think that they do this? I don't know why they do that. We don't differentiate them for different years. We use them interchangeably from the guys at Felpro. So we have Felpro makes different bore size gaskets, and then within the bore sizes, they also make different different gasket thicknesses. So their normal ones are 41 and 53 thousandths. So 53 would be like a factory one. 41, you can tighten it up a little bit. Then they also do other gaskets. These are all their MLS, like performance gaskets. Then they also do their gasket kits where they sell different kinds of gaskets that are dedicated for the bore size of the combinations that they're using. What's the practical limit on thicker head gaskets and forced induction? Is 70 thousandths weaker and prone to blowing out more than say a 50? I don't know. I've never tried that. I know that Dulcich, when he was doing his compression test on the Dodge, that he did it way back, and I think that they varied it from 8-1 to 12-1. But he basically just stacked gaskets, which I applaud the fact that and this is something that we've talked about many times, and guys are asking about compression changes. It's hard to do a static compression change because we're always changing something else. In his case, he obviously put the piston farther down in the hole every time he stacked more gaskets on it. But there's no good way to do it because if you change the piston and go, okay, I went from a dish piston now to a less dish and then to a flat top and then to a dome, well, you're also changing flame travel when you're doing that. So you could be changing power irrespective or in addition to a change in compression. Well, what if we make the head chamber smaller and smaller and smaller? Well, then you're milling the head, and it's going to change other things. If we change the head gasket, again, we're changing quench, and so there's almost nothing that you could do that doesn't change something else that somebody in the comments wouldn't point to and say, what about that? And without isolating it, you don't have an answer for that. So it's hard just to change compression. At least you can change it like 1 point. We could go from 8-1 to 9-1 or 9-1 to 10-1 fairly easy. We could do that with gaskets, basically. We definitely do it with gaskets and milling. But again, is that enough of a change? And can we extrapolate from that one compression point change to the others? like what happens at from 5 to 1 to 6 to 1? What happens at 16 to 1 to 17 to 1? My opinion is that it's a bell curve, that we get an area of like 8 to 1 to 12 to 1 where things are happening, and then we start having trade-offs that are affecting it elsewhere beyond those ranges where it doesn't where the gains are not nearly as much. So we're talking about a whole bunch of we have a lot of people here, so we're talking about a whole bunch of different things, and I don't really know where to jump in here. There, what's the practical limit? Have a 13 to 1 small block iron heads. Can I run pump E85? E85 will probably work with that. It is an iron head and it's 13.5 to 1. My guess is you probably also have a big camshaft in that, which is probably going to help things. What rod clearance is? It's normally based on the diameter of the rod, just like ring clearance is. You can oversize the turbo as well. It will go into surge if you do that. Adrian, you want to know what those rods are? They're pretty cool, huh? So at work wanted to stack gaskets on the Mercedes V8 to reduce compression. When Dulcich did, he was just doing it on a naturally aspirated deal, and it was just happening for the dyno, so it's not that big a deal. You could also do it with copper, and you could just, instead of stacking them, you could just have different thickness copper gaskets. I mean, when Kazi ran Engine Masters, he had a 300 thousandths thick head gasket for one of his applications. He basically raised the deck height of the motor is what he did, but he did it according to the rules with head gaskets rather than changing the deck height, which you couldn't do. But they didn't say anything about head gaskets. So that was the thing that we're talking about the reinterpretation of the rules being a different thing than like actual cheating. And since it was Engine Masters and money was on the line, they didn't tell him he couldn't do it. So he's definitely going to do it. And that definitely works. And so you could do different thicknesses rather than just stacking a bunch of 100,000s. You could do a 300 or 400 or whatever. I think if you take a short block with dome pistons for high compression, make a few pulls with good heads, then take the short block and machine the domes off of it. A big mill and run again. Well, we could take the pistons out and do that and then run it again. But again, we talked about that. If you change, you could also swap the pistons, because if you machine the domes off of them, you're going to change the balance anyways. But if you machine the domes off of them, you're going to change the flame travel. And the flame travel by itself might affect power, irrespective of the change in compression. Usual suspects exterminator, 33% actually. So it's 33% gain in power. Is that what we're talking about? In the two-stroke world, it's not uncommon to do away with head gaskets and run anaerobic gasket maker in its place. Never tried it. So are they? Do they just have two machine surfaces though? I don't know that that's going to work well on these motors. Let's see. I have a 12-to-1 355 from a Circle Track car. I used a calculator you told us about yesterday and figured out my dynamic compression ratio with the cam I have, and it comes to 10.6. So how big is the cam? What are the duration numbers at 50? That's right. Don't say the word thought. I have a 6-liter with flat tops. They stick out of the bore 6,000s. That's not uncommon for LS stuff. If 40,000s is the ideal clearance with a 51 gasket, should I shave the head to achieve this? I don't know that 40 is the ideal clearance. I don't know where you're getting the ideal number from. We've varied head gaskets quite a bit, and I don't know that there's an ideal number there. Richard, you're so good at saying still. Sometimes I can't tell if the video is frozen. What's your take on Mazda SkyActiv technology? I don't know anything about it. I don't think I've ever even looked it up. Chris, I think a 10-speed is probably going to be better than a 4-speed, because if you can keep the engine running or the motor, I say that stuff on purpose. If you can keep it running in its RPM range where it's making the most average power, it's going to be quicker. And especially if that 10-speed is an automatic that shifts really, really fast, probably faster than a guy in a 4-speed or in a 4-speed automatic. A lot of the multi-speed cars are really good. The Coyote Mustang is a really good example of that. If you're going to get rid of the head gasket, at least make some cool swirly patterns in the two machine surfaces to mesh. So it'd be like a cracked rod, but it'd be a cracked block and head. These guys are still arguing about the rods. SkyActiv is just like a VVT. Is SkyActiv change? Somebody said that it's changing crankshaft, but if it's like, I understand VVT and variable cam and VTEC, but I thought that they were talking about doing something else. And they use turbocharging with high compression ratios. Supposedly it has a variable crankshaft and go from 8-to-1 to 13-to-1. I don't think it's variable crankshaft. My guess is that they would be doing variable cam timing to change the dynamic compression. Richard, do you know of anybody who has an Aries Hemi heads on an LS engine? I don't think I've seen that. Skype is multiple technologies. Like I said, I haven't ever looked it up to know what they're doing with it. Richard, how did you like the GT35 for the K24? I don't think I ran that. Did I? Did I run the GT35 on there? Richard, remember the Honda VX engines from the 90s? Yeah, I was an owner of one of those, and I gave it to Chad. And it did do something to the valves to increase it. It opened the valves at different times, so it delayed the cam timing one valve to the other, so it staggered the openings to induce swirl, so that they could put mixture motion in there, and they could actually have the thing light off at 19-1. It's more than 17-1. It's closer to 19 when we were running it on the chassis dyno. Uh, 296,302. If it's 296,302 at 50, then it will certainly run on E85 at that static compression ratio. SkyActiv has a variable compression because it's basically hinged on the rod. SkyActiv is stratified fueling. It ignites the tip of a weird piston that has almost a cup in the top. It can ignite a 17-1 mixture because it's 14-1 in the center of the piston, but not elsewhere. So the stratified charge stuff had been done. The Honda CVCC stuff was like that. They had a pre-chamber basically where they would ignite a very small amount of a rich mixture and then inject that mixture, that burning mixture, into the lean mixture, and they would get better burn that way. And it works pretty well. 256, 264 at 50. Okay, that's still fine. That's a big enough camshaft. No way that these rods gain 30% torque. You can see them helping with side loading friction losses. This could show some slight increase in power. Well, apparently from the discussion that they're having, that's not where the gain is. Infinity has variable compression, variable displacement. I thought that Saab tried to do that too. I thought that they tried to like cant the head to change the compression. SkyActiv uses a leverage connecting rod, the variable hinge position, moving the fixed hinge increases or lowers the compression ratio. So they're just changing. Are they changing the rod length then? About time to get the snowmobiles out. Gain 60 horsepower, taking the air filter off my car. That's nice. Have you run a Gen 2 GTX 2860? I have not. I would have, Tavon, I would imagine that that's going to be a lot better than a disco, the disco potato. Richard, I remember you talking about experimenting with variable intake runners in the past. I've made almost all the intakes that I made were adjustable so that we could vary the intake length. What fuel pressure for E85 turbo 5.7, roughly 500 to 600 horsepower? Is this the fuel pressure is going to be dictated by your the fuel system that you're using, the injectors that you're using. Normally, fuel pressure is around 58 psi. For earlier ones, it could be 43, but those are pretty standard fuel pressures. William, not to barge in, when I met with them at SEMA, so they were at SEMA. That's cool. I wish I would have gone. I was allowed to pick up and look close at these rods. They claim an increase in piston speed after TDC, better cylinder loading at low RPM. Richmond, you got a 05 Chevy with a 4.3, and what can you do to add more power? The normal mods for is it a 4.3 V6 or is it an 05? So is it the V6 motor? Just sat down from a not so pleasant day of working on a 63 SS. Apparently, I had to find 14-inch rims and tires when I needed to make it rollable for the shipper. Do you have a preferred rod for a 5.3 on boost under 20 pounds? The stock one. And if you want, you can step up from the Gen 3 to the Gen 4 rod. Nissan had the heads canted along with the hinges on the rods. I watched an engine dyno comparing 6-inch rods and 5.7 rods. The 6-inch rods made more power everywhere, except the 5.7 rods had slightly more power on top. So how can you say one made more power everywhere, but the 5.7 rods made more power on top? That's not everywhere then. And I've run that test. I ran that test on 3 motors, and there was no power at all between a 6-inch rod and a 5.7 rod. I did it on 302. I did it on 327. I did it on 350. And it made zero difference. The picture of the rod is in the thumbnail. Any extra prayers my way? Tomorrow I'll be pulling the motor and the trans. Is it going to be cold out? The 4.3 liter V6, I'm hoping you're talking about. I have V6 stuff. There are some small cams for those that work. You could put headers on it, which helps. Tuning probably helps. You could port the heads. Admiral, did you hear I'm working on modular stuff? I was waiting to hear from you today. I've got 4.6 2-valve and 5.4 4-valve stuff coming up. Would you rather have a 4.6 aluminum block or a 5.4 iron block? For doing what? For making what kind of power? Is this thing NA? Is it turbocharged? Are you going to stay late tonight to cover the Artemis launch? No, I'm going to be gone in 2 minutes. You said the T word. Uh-oh. How about other guys on an Olds rocket? I have a 394. That would be other guys in a 62 Olds. Most people, or the one that I want to do first, if I'm going to do an Olds, I probably would find a 403 because that I have seen those in wrecking yards before. Well, I've seen one. A 455 is probably what most people would want me to do. Although I think people have offered 350s. The 403 was very common in Trans Am stuff, right? In a Trans Am, not Trans Am racing, but in a Trans Am. You know, it's like the first time you see a Trans Am. A smaller hot side than compressor side, T3, T4, will have a hard time overspinning itself if the blades are compatible in flow. Have you ever run Summit Pro LS rods and pistons? I picked some up for my 5.3. They for 20 pounds you could just run stock stuff with ring gaps. So all of the Summit Pro LS stuff will have no problem with that strength level. You just need to have it tuned right. I've never run a Buick Nailhead. I don't even remember seeing one. They may have run those at West Tech. Admiral, just for that, I'm not going to do the modular motor video. So you just ruined it. Not want to exert 4,000 pump pressure on the cam lobe. Okay, the engine can produce any compression ratio from 8:1 to 14:1. The highest torque is achieved at 8:1, given high acceleration, while the best gas mileage fuel efficiency is achieved at 14:1. Good morning from Sweden's in the house. What's your favorite brand of carburetor? I don't have a favorite. I like them all. I would like to run a Predator carburetor. People have been talking about that. Recalcitrant, you just made it to the computer. So I just watched the short video they released about the rod. It looks as though the top wrist pin is stationary. So it's pivoting down below then? Eric, you bought a 15.2 CFM air compressor pump from Harbor Freight today. Going to see how good it works with a 5 horsepower Briggs for power. Have you ever thought about building a Toyota Tacoma motor, specifically a 2RZ, and doing a big bang? I have not. Are there any aftermarket heads for those? Are there any aftermarket cams for those? Are there any aftermarket intakes for those? I mean, we can make all that, but Gen 3 HP tuning versus Holley Terminator X, they both will do the same thing. I would like to do, I want to run a rotary. I just want to be able to put a turbo. I'd like to run an NA one too, because I remember reading all this stuff back in the day. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll out at 82%, thinking that this is not going to produce increased torque by 30%. That seems like a lot. I have a Magnuson supercharger. Those are good. The later Coyote heads flow really well. I don't have any plans to do an EcoBoost. I've only run those on the chassis dynos. What standalone ECU? The ones that I have used on the dyno, which is very easy because we're only doing wide open throttle stuff basically, is the Holley HP Dominator and Terminator X now, and then the Mega Squirt, the MS3 Pro. And we used to run a lot of stuff with Fast, the XFI stuff way back in the day. I think the Coyote heads flow over 300. We ported a set. When I say we, somebody ported a set. I tested them and they did make power, but that was an early one. That was a 2010, 11 motor that we got from Ford early on. And it definitely picked up power by porting. I think that they improved the power by about 30 CFM when they ported it. Richard, you should do a video on programming an ECM for max power under boost. I don't really know what you mean by that. But every time I run a test on the engine dyno, I don't know about maximum power. Maximum power is right before the thing breaks, so we never try to do that. Do you recommend anything other than Manley rods for a 4.6? There are lots of good rod manufacturers for 4.6s. Top pin is not stationary. There's a moderate movement involved. There would almost have to be, I think, right? Has anybody seen the I don't know if it's 4-piston or it's one of those guys has the billet Honda block and the billet Honda head. It's got to be a K series, right? It was I was looking at it today. It was pretty impressive. They were talking about running 100 pounds of boost or something with it. Would you ever revisit Gen 3? Are you talking about Gen 3 Hemi stuff? Can you remote tune my supercharged fully built 6-liter? I'm not a tuner. Picking up a 69 Boss 302 on Friday. Nice. I think it would look nice in a 69 Cougar. It would. It'd make it look like an Eliminator, though. There are 400 horsepower NAK series Hondas. Yeah, they're big motors running on nitromethane, right? I think I saw some of those over at when I was over visiting with the guys from Skunk. Oh, so you weren't thinking Gen 3 Hemi, you're thinking a Gen 3 LS when the rod broke? So you just want to see a bigger Gen 3 number so that you can, if I bring the torque in earlier, you just want to see a bigger Gen 3 number? They did have Trans Am Cougars too. I like the Eliminator Cougars, and I like the way that their taillights blink. They're like their turn signals. K series on the 4-piston stuff, but they make a few other items for B&H. 4G63s are good. Yeah, they're making a lot of power with those. 500 horsepower on an NA 2-liter, so making 250 horsepower per liter. Mike, we already had a short runner intake manifold on that. We had a high ram on one of them, and then we had a race sniper on the other one. I mean, we could put something even shorter than that. We could put a BTR intake manifold on there, or a Holley short ram or something to take even more out of it. But what it needs is, it doesn't need the manifold. What it needs is to have the boost controlled by RPM. So we need to have a rising boost curve like a centrifugal, so that that way we'll have a lot less torque and we just have a big peak number. That would be the way to do it. Yeah, the sequential turn signals on the eliminators were cool. And was the Cougar eliminator available with the Boss motor? Have you thought about running the longest rod you can get? So something longer than a 6-inch rod? What do you think about Texas speed cams? I've tested a few of them. They've all done what they're supposed to do. CNC ported 799 versus CNC ported 243. They're the same. They're the same head. So there isn't going to be any difference. As long as they were both ported by the same person. Ricky, I don't know. The manufacturer, somebody said that they were at SEMA and that they have test data to show that they did something. Not just eliminators, you get 6970 with Boss 429s, but there's only a few. I knew that. I just didn't know that. I thought that the Boss 302 engine, that specific engine, was available in the Cougars. He just said I'm trying to turn it on to test it. Make sure it's turned off. You should run 706s on the. What is an 853? Is that the early LS1 head? Did you read? Because I know for a fact you didn't read the manual. Do you know which one of those slots? Yeah, because all the cable does is just touches the two together. Is there a real advantage of shot peening stock rods? I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to see somebody get to the point of where the rod would break if they didn't shot peen it, and that it would if they didn't. I'd like to see what that is. A Boss 302 Cougar. I thought so. No, there's no way. Yeah, Honda cranks are the stock Honda cranks are very strong. We always ran them in the Bonneville cars. King of the Planet. Is your 671 a blower shop one? Is it a stripped? Is it a stripped blower? Is it like a race blower? Is it really good? I think we've done near 1,000 horsepower with a 671. A Turbo Boss 302. Well, we know what that will do. A Boss motor, the stock one that I tested, made 375. So if you double that at 14.5 pounds, you kind of know what it's going to do. Mooneyham strip. I think a 671 is about 1,000 horsepower blower. I remember your videos on cam timing. Do you suggest starting with manufacturers recommended? I asked because I was thinking about putting a Trek Norris in my 5.3. You can start there, but when we do it, we do optimized tune for each one of them. As it turns out, the timing curve at wide open throttle for a Trek Norris cam is exactly the same as it is for a stock cam. Do you use stock rods in the Turbo Boss? I've never built the Turbo Boss. Half an hour later, it really is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. This was a good deal. The rods, I don't know. A 30% gain. I'm still saying no. So I'm still sticking by that. It's not side loading. Apparently, it is cylinder pressure, like they were talking about. I still don't see how that's. I'd like to see the. I would really like to see the cylinder pressure trace, and they have to have that to verify their claim, I'm sure. But I would like to see that. I would like to see what the cylinder pressure trace looks like, because I'd want to see the dyno results, and then I'd want to see why the dyno results are there, that they're saying that the dyno results are. And I'd like to see what other changes there are. Did they have to change is the piston different? Is like, what else is different when they did this rod? Did they just take out a conventional rod and stick this rod in there where everything else was the same? What happened? And I want to know what happened, obviously, from the results. And then I also want to know why. So that would be a lot of information to be really good stuff. But on that note, I will see you guys all in the morning.